and welcome to another episode of the Focal Thought. My guest today is Dr. Marie Cartier. How are you, Dr. Marie
I'm
Cartier?
fine. I'm fine. Thank you for having me back on your show.
No, it's good. We had a fun conversation the last time, and my audience really loved listening to you. So, pleasure to have you back. And just as a quick reminder to new listeners out there, you are a scholar, visual performance artist, queer activist, poet, and theologian. And you've been active in many movements for social change. You teach at the University of California, University Northridge in gender, women's studies, as well as in queer studies. And you've got your book out, Debut on My Religion, Women, Gay Bars, Theology Before Stonewall. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
I wanted to ask you right off the bat, in terms of feminism, sometimes, like we were brought up thinking there's, male and female, but in this day and age, there are many different kinds of feminism. And I've seen, as many as maybe 10 to 12 different kinds of feminism, such as liberal, radical, Marxist, socialist, ecofeminism, I've heard of French feminism, cultural feminism. There's very many movements and ideologies. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and your experience with it.
Well, the quote is attributed to Gloria Steinem, but we could, I think actually it may have been somebody else, but it's attributed to her, the founder of Ms. Magazine, that feminism is the radical notion that women are people. And so if you look across the board at all kinds of disciplines, there have been over and over times where women haven't been considered part of the group that's designated as people. So if you take men and you decide that they are the dominant narrative and you create cultures, cultural tropes, things, corporations, identity maps, you create ways of being in the world in that cultural construct that privileges men and assumes women, and conflates women with them, then women aren't people in their own right. So all of the tropes that you just suggested are different ways and groupings that haven't considered women as people. And so when you pull women out of those groups, say French feminists, and they decide to say, feminism is the radical notion that women are people, like we exist here. How do women change the map? Like, how do you change the map so that women are included? And in any grouping, from linguistics through to the hard sciences, where are women? And so when you include women in any of those constructs, right, that women haven't been in, then you have to say, well, how does this change because women are now included? Or women are part of the narrative. One of the things that was supposed to happen in the States that hasn't happened yet is that women would be on the money, right? So we were going to put Sojourner Truth, I think, on the $20 bill. It hasn't happened yet. We have no women on the money. We have Susan B. Anthony on $1 that didn't really work because it was almost the same size as our quarter. And so what would you call that type of feminism? Do you see what I'm saying? It's like that is a feminist act to say women are people and women should be included in the United States money as represented, because money is the power structure. But if we don't have women there and we include women, then what kind of feminism is that? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, here in Canada, we've got the Queen on our currency, and then recently we've got Viola Desmond, who's come on our $10 bill. So there has been some movement that way.
Right. And so, here in the States, we're having a huge issue with what's happening in Texas and abortion rights. And I could talk a lot about that, but what kind of feminism is that? That's many times what we're dealing with is not so much the different striations of feminism, but the rock bottom level of, do I get to own my body?
Sure. And that is as a woman, right? Like whether you attribute it to gender or can you be yourself? Because these different types of feminisms that we see, they're almost curated to suit maybe the local community or the local group that has created it, right? Like say with Black feminism or French feminism. So, and you're saying you are right in saying that they all just want to be people. There's that term misandry.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold up with there. I mean, Black feminists created the hashtag Black Lives Matter. So it's not like curating for a specific group. I mean, feminism is, there's another definition of feminism. I am called a feminist whenever I say or do anything that differentiates me from a doormat. I mean, so it's like where I am positioned in the world. If I am a Black woman, if I'm a queer woman, if I am a French woman, I mean, how do I make space to exist? When we talk, it's not a small matter, like the fact that right now in Texas, abortion has been outlawed. Yeah. And and another thing that Gloria Steinem said is we will always be dragged back to the abortion rights table. And I heard her say that when I was an undergraduate at when I was in my first graduate program at UCLA. She said that in the 80s and 90s. I mean, we are now looking at the destruction of Roe v. Wade in the United States. So what kind of feminism is that? I mean, that should be, like as Hillary Clinton said in Beijing, women's rights are human rights once and for all. So the striations of feminism don't interest me as much as the idea that the rock bottom level that women exist and women should show up the same as everybody else. That is what interests me.
Sure. And, I think what I mean is that, we have these different types of feminism because, of the different regions, the different communities that exist. But there is a baseline, like you're saying, that at the end of it all, no matter what type of feminism it is, for the most part, people want to just be acknowledged as, a woman or, or as a male, and they want equal rights because, if we are created in the equal eyes of God, if you take that approach, there is no inequality. I mean, everyone, might not be born healthy, but everyone is born with an equal right. And that gets taken away, right, through environment, societal structure, politics, religion, etc. And history, right? Because a lot of history has sort of dominated this and taken us on a different path.
Well, when I was coming of age as a feminist in the 80s, we would say her story because her story has been left out of his story. And I also want to, you don't need to be identified as a woman to be a feminist. Just like you can work for Black lives without being Black. All lives should matter. All lives don't matter. That's why Black Lives Matter. And I always hate to put any other construct in that because that is its own construct. But women's lives haven't mattered as much, which is why one of the first issues of the second wave movement was to create the language so that the first thing when you met a woman was not Miss or Mrs., identifying her as either married or unmarried, but Ms., because for a man, Mr. does not identify you as available. It just is your title. And so for Ms., MS, that was one of the first issues. And I also want to say that, we're not just talking about men and women. I mean, especially today in feminism, we have many, many opportunities to gender ourselves, right? And that this is National Coming Out Month. This is in the States, October 11th is National Coming Out Day. So, whether you identify as genderqueer, gender fluid, non-binary, trans, along that entire spectrum, right? The issue right now for me, again, is the fact that women get pregnant, and we are in a constitutional crisis in the States right now around women getting to control their bodies. And it's extremely serious. And the way our Supreme Court is set up right now, and its refusal to hear and work on what is happening in Texas, affects our entire nation, and should be of concern to our neighboring countries, such as Canada.
Sure. I mean, things can spread, it's a small world. What happens locally doesn't sometimes stay locally, right? Especially with things like the internet. How do you think this came about? I mean, I know sometimes when you have two opposites, they'll always try to be, dominance by one. And this is not only just, male, female, this is old, young. It could be, within races. It could be between age groups. Do you think it's just natural way of things when you have two opposites that there'll be, a strive for dominance? Or do you see anything in the history of, how it came to be like this? Maybe men were out working, whereas women were taking care of the family at home. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think the suppression of the female is natural. No, I think it came about, I don't think that women were taking care of the families while men were out. That I think what happened is industrialization happened.
Yeah.
And women were at because women actually bear children. When people had a farm economy, and I think I may have talked about this last time I was on your show, when people had a farm economy, women are bearing children who are the workers on that farm. And so they are seen as the producers of labor, and everybody's working for the same goal, right? To keep the farm going, to keep food on the table, to keep workers to work in the farm. And it's all coming out of this one family. But industrialization moved people out of the home. And so a man traditionally going out of the home and bringing home money, it's like the women bearing children at home is not necessarily seen as a producer of labor that goes directly into that home. So that's one of the things that happened. When the British first came to the United States and they saw the more equitable distribution of work within Native Americans, I mean, that was not, quote, natural to them. I mean, the term helpmeet was actually a term used by our original colonists to identify a wife. And so a man might say, this is my helpmeet. And that term actually meant somebody who would help meet my needs. So where does sexism come from? I mean, there's a huge narrative of how that works, but one of the ways that we who in the field of gender studies tend to look at that is the move away from economies that privilege the production of labor, such as children, and where everybody is working for this one goal. When you move women out of the workforce, which is why putting women in the workforce has been so instrumental to equalizing the sexes.
Sure. And we have, we may not be all the way there, but we have made a lot of stride, right? At least within the last 100 years. We see CEOs, entrepreneurs.
But we still don't have the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States. That is still something and it was authored by Alice Paul, one of the significant members of the suffrage movement in the 20s, I think 1929. And we still don't have it. And it is very hopeful that we will have it this soon with this current administration. That equal rights will not be abridged because of sex. We still don't have that in the States. So these things are crucial to look at. Yeah,
do you think it has anything to do with fear and ignorance in the way of not understanding, women? Like when men look at women, they fear because they don't understand, the sexual cycle maybe, or, what it is like to be a woman, and ignorance in terms of, again, uneducation.
Well, I have a lot of theories about that. One of the main things that I think prevents, and we're not talking about all men, certainly, right?
Oh,
Not at all. But when men are very afraid of I mean, right now we're seeing, I just saw on Twitter this morning, somebody from Fox News criticizing Pete Buttigieg, our Secretary of Transportation, who just had adopted a baby with his husband Chasten, that Fox News is criticizing him for taking paternity leave and saying, what are you going to do, breastfeed? And I think one of the huge issues that cannot be denied is the fear of what Adrienne Rich deemed compulsory heterosexuality. So if I am so terrified of appearing gay, I'm going to go overboard to appear macho or different than that, right? So all of these traits that are deemed gay become suspect. Wanting to stay home with your kids, wanting to be there for your wife's birth, sitting at a table with, 4 couples and asking your girlfriend what she wants first. I mean, so many times men are accused of being pussy whipped, and then the next thing they're accused of is being gay. So the fear of being called gay often makes straight people play in a much more constricted sandbox than they would if they were gay already. I mean, I know that because that's happened to me, being in a party or something and having somebody talk to me, and then, or having a straight cis man talk to me, and I will have opinions and talk back and, trying to have a conversation. And he'll be like, oh, wow, you got a lot to say. What are you, a feminist? What are you, a lesbian? And that comes almost immediately on top of that. And so there is a real fear of being deemed homosexual. And that fear comes with, if I am deemed homosexual, I will be punished. And often that is true. That is true. I mean, people, my brother was gay bashed. I come from a family of 6. He was gay bashed and put in the hospital at one point. So, it's true that there is often real punishment that comes from terrified people around appearing gay. So they try to wipe out the gay. There's a book by my friend Bernadette Barton, Pray the Gay Away. What does it mean if I am seen as gay? Even if I'm not. So how can I constrict my behavior so I definitely am not seen as gay? And that happens to a lot of people. They constrict their behavior in a way often that gay people don't, because they're already gay. And that theory, again, by Adrienne Rich, I think is really instrumental to study. It's not so much the punishment for gay people themselves, right? It is often that I'm discussing here and that I'll talk about with my students in an introductory class to gender women's studies. It's the idea that for straight cis people, that fear of being called gay often makes them limit themselves to anything that might appear gay. So whereas a woman who's great in softball might decide to stop being bad in softball if people start saying, what are you, a dyke? What are you, a lesbian? A guy who wants to be a dancer, but he's straight, starts not wanting to be a dancer when people call him a faggot. So these things are real, and people over and over again, even today, 2021, I hear about students and young people who pull back on gender traits that are not typically associated with the gender they are identifying with. So if you are a cis straight man or a cis straight woman, oftentimes the ability to do things that don't line up with what that's supposed to look like in the culture mean that you rein yourself in a way that gay people often don't, because you're already there. I mean, I was a line cook. I drove a truck. I got a black belt. I have 7 degrees. I mean, it's just a lot of what gave me the permission to do those things was the fact that I was already gay. So the question of like, are you gay? Are you lesbian? Which I got throughout my life was like, yeah, I am. Yeah. What else you got? And I think that's very, very real, Croydon. And I don't think it's something that often straight people understand, that pressure is real, and they will just almost unconsciously constrict their behavior so it appears straight. Even if they're straight, they're going to, they're not going to do things that might identify them as being gender different than what they're supposed to be.
No, it's very true, because I think the issue also has to do with tradition, because if you're born with a certain set of sexual organs, you're this. If you're born with these type of organs, you're this, right? And for me, gender is not necessarily what's between the legs as much as what's between the ears, in the sense that you speak to that limitation. And I think it's maybe these days with more consciousness and awareness as we evolve and become more aware of what's actually going on, that you could be born with certain sexual organs but might not think or feel that way. So someone who has a penis, they might want to go to Disney and become that dancer and wear sort of lighter shade clothes. And I've seen it with even best of my friends who act as the alpha male, but the moment there's a woman in the room, they're able to bring out the feminine side of them that you'd never see if they were just sort of hanging with the guys. But I have seen in relationships where the male actually has more feminine energy than the woman, and vice versa, the woman has more if you can call it male energy than the man. And it has nothing to do with your sexual organs, but just how you maybe think, feel, the energy that you have. And I think that's one of the worst things, is that if you feel a certain way, you're not allowed to act or feel it because of societal pressures and limitations.
And that's part of why the young queer community is moving away from the binary, right? So you are gendering not based on what's between your legs, as you said. You're gendering based on how you feel, who you believed yourself to be. And I hope, that we're moving to a world where traits are not deemed as masculine or feminine. And that would be because biological identity should not be destiny. Like, what does it mean if, what would the world look like if the crayon box that you could play in is whatever those are, it's all available to you. And we're not deeming like good at sports as masculine. And it's easy to do. We all know it. I mean, when I say to my students, what happens to a little boy who's crying? It's immediate people that can say, boys don't cry. What happens to a little girl who's fighting back? Ladies don't do that. So this stuff is so ingrained in us. I think that there is this new thing that's just coming out where the toy stores have to have an aisle of yellow and green toys. I feel like I just read that, because normally you walk into a toy store and it's like walking into a store that's like, you can might as well draw a line down the middle and one side is pink and one side is blue. And so moving away from that, because it's for sure that babies don't know. Babies aren't going to care if you put a pink or blue blanket on them. Yeah. So when we move to a world that doesn't identify those traits as male or female or masculine or feminine, but allows people to choose what's interesting to them based on who they are innately, and we're not, like you said, the alpha male who suddenly feels like there's the ability to be quote, more feminine. When we can stop that, you know, when people can be who they are based on what is innately who inside them. Unfortunately, especially in the world we are today, I don't think we're there yet.
No, there's a long way to go. And, you know, I've even seen people who, you know, who say, okay, you know, in the workplace, we might not have that equality, right, with men and women. But at the end of the day, these men, they actually go back and they answer to their wives and they do what their wives tell them, right? So they might not have it in their career, but in their life, you know, they don't have that same imbalance that they had at the workplace. And it goes for the opposite way too, for success, you know, like they say, behind every, you know, successful man, there's a woman. There's, you know, and it's not just that, it's the opposite too. You've got a partner who's nurturing and supportive of your success, and you're going to get great results because of that. Because the ideal thing is when you have two people, whether it's the same sex or, you know, different sex, opposite sex, that you support each other and nurture each other, and you reach your goals of success together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Definitely. You know, and that's part of, you know, love is love is love is love is love. Like finding somebody that supports you. And there's not enough love in the world. So supporting people, finding a match, finding somebody or several somebodies if they're polyamorous, you know, finding or being single and finding a community that supports them. You know, it is hard, especially for young people, to find their way. And as we move forward in time, one of the things that we are moving towards is the ability for people, especially in the queer community, the ability for people to self-identify. Like that's one of the questions that is constantly asked in young queer community. How do you identify? What is your identity? You know, like you're trying to choose that. But the only way you can choose that identity is if you see it modeled somewhere else. Like people don't sit in a room by themselves without any outside input, coming up with the idea that they're genderqueer or gender different or a lesbian or gay or any of the identity markers we have under the rainbow umbrella, right? So how do I decide how to identify? I see it modeled somewhere. So the more we can support the modeling of gender difference, gender variance, the different ways that people can actually be in the world, non-traditional relationships, whatever those look like. You know, I mean, for many people, interracial relationships are still very different, you know, age differences. You know, an older woman with a younger man, for instance, is still seen as very, very different. You know, this religious differences where people find somebody and they're able to be happy. Young people are looking at us. Young people are looking for a way to be happy today. And it's hard. It's a scary world. I mean, we have climate change, you know, they are facing a world that's very difficult. They're facing a world that's, you know, way past whatever that clock was supposed to be, where we were in danger of how many minutes to midnight we get to go. We're past that. You know, we're looking at a world that by 2050, we'll have more plastic in the ocean than fish. How is the blue planet going to cool itself down? Yeah. So one of the things that we can offer people is support to find somebody to take the journey with, or support to find a community to take the journey with. And I think it's very, very important to allow people to find a way forward, you know, with sanity. And part of that sanity, as you say, is finding a partner or finding a community that supports you at the very least. You know, I mean, again, to go back to what's happening in Texas, to force women to have kids, even, you know, you have 12-year-olds right now being forced to have a kid because there isn't even an exception for rape or incest right now. So forcing people to live a life that is not the life they choose is horrific. And it's not, I mean, as a person who regularly interacts with, like right now I have 200 students in 6 classes. I regularly interact with young people from all over the globe. young people are extremely worried about many things, climate change being one of the primary things they're worried about. And so at the very least, we should be able to give them the freedom to choose how they want to go forward into this scary world.
Yeah, and it's a very delicate balance. Like, I haven't done enough research, on that, or, but when you're in that political position where you make a decision that affects a lot of people, when you have to make a decision where, a lot of these people come from different walks of life, have different religions, different upbringings, cultures, different opinions, when you yourself, have those things where you have your own biases and thoughts, the fact that you have to make a decision, that everyone has to follow, it's a tough thing to do. And also when you have to make a decision for young people who might not know, what's happening at the end of the road, because they're still young, they're still unaware. It's a tough call. I still haven't done my research to even go there. But yeah, it is affecting, right? Like, it's affecting people on both sides.
I don't know what you mean by both sides.
I mean, those who are, say, for, and those who are against, right? Like, for an issue, or.
Yeah, I mean, I am like absolutely over the both sides thing. I'll just tell you that right now. I mean, living in the States, there is like a side, and to me, that side is sanity, and on the other side is like some insanity. And I'm not talking about mental health issues per se. Which I'm totally for people getting the help they need and identifying mental illness and go forward. But, when we have people, we had supposedly right now and I'm not picking on Texas, but there's a lot of other states that we have that have significant issues, and even places in California that are like looking at some of this stuff in a way that is not positing to a viable future. I mean, right now, somebody captured audio in a Texas school board or some meeting where they said they're being forced, if you're going to present a book as a teacher in a Texas classroom on one side of a contested issue, you have to present the opposing viewpoint. And so one of the people in this meeting said, if you have a book on the Holocaust, for instance, then you need to present a book on the opposing issue. Well, what's the opposing issue to the Holocaust? There's no opposing issue. It happened. There isn't like, what's the opposing view? That there was no Holocaust? Like that kind of craziness? And to me, that's like, we don't have climate change. Come on, look at it.
Opposing issue as in why the Holocaust might have been a good thing? Like, is that what they mean? Something like that?
No, or that it didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
And so these kinds of things, like, I don't think we have, I mean, for me, the January 6th insurrection in this country was treason. There isn't another side to that, You break into the White House, and you try to find the Speaker of the House to execute her. That's it. It's treason. There isn't another side to that. There isn't. And so right now, I think that we have to be very careful about these two sides to things. There is a side. There's not a side. There's a way of being in the world that respects people, that deals with like people being independent agents as well as part of a community. I mean, we are interdependent. And if we didn't see that during the COVID-19, I don't know where you were, we missed each other. We needed each other. It was very difficult. We are independent, but we also are interdependent. And we need to find a way to have that interdependence in a way that values each of us. And we can't, right now in the States, this idea that every state should get to do what they want without government interference. For instance, in California, we have strict gun laws. One of the things that our Supreme Court is looking at is making gun laws more relaxed, making California and making all states be open carry states. Well, California wants to do what it wants to do around gun laws. It's not an open carry state. At the same time, the people who say, states should get to do what they want to do around abortion and gay marriage. Well, you can't pick and choose. You can't say, well, we get to do what we want to do around, we don't have to follow constitutional law around abortion and gay marriage. We get to do what we want to do, but we're going to force everybody to do what we want to do around gun law. So it's very clear that the conservative agenda right now in this country isn't about a more open government, or it's like less government interference. It's about very much government interference. I mean, what's happening in Texas around regulating women's bodies? I mean, I'm not sure if you all are aware of it, but right now, somebody who reports that someone helped a woman get an abortion, I mean, by like driving her or escorting her, that person who reports somebody will get a $10,000 reward. So this is a crazy world. And so I'm right now, I'm not looking at the two sides. I'm looking at, there is a community of people who are moving towards a more just and equitable world. And I think that's the ship I'm on. And I hope that everybody gets on that ship, because I think that other ship is sinking.
And that's the thing. That's what I mean, in the sense, when you have these two sides, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, there's always going to be two sides. Like if you plan to grow a garden, there's always going to be a squirrel that comes and, takes your harvest. And sometimes it's the squirrel that's in power, right? In politics, sometimes it's the illogical side that's in power. Sometimes it's the logical side that's in power. And this is the way of the world, and we have to navigate. And yes, if the end of goal sight is, success, sustainability, the betterment of our planet, individual rights and freedom, equality for all, that's the goal for those who are in that clubhouse. But then there's an opposing clubhouse that doesn't want that. They want the opposite. They want death, destruction. They want immediate gratification. They don't care about equality. And, I've been known to say there's three sides to a coin, not just the two sides, because there's the side of the coin. That's for another episode for sure.
Yeah, that's for the people. Yeah, I like that idea. There's the side of the coin. Yeah.
Maybe that's the side we're both on. I don't know.
I'd have to have clearly identified, but I know, as I said, I think I'm on in the first group that you mentioned. I think I'm pretty clearly in that group. Yeah.
No, that's good to hear. Listen, thanks again for coming on the episode again. I'm really glad you came and shared your thoughts. There's always, something new to learn. And then if people want to get a hold of you, I'll put the same contact information right in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wish you well. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Croydon. It's a great show. Thanks for having me.